So I'm gonna do a voiceover in post for this first video just while I get everything set up. I'm setting up the world in beta 1.6 test build 3 so that I can get a bunch of stuff from the chests that spawn, because it's a debug build and there's a bunch of stuff that they left in that you shouldn't be able to get. And while I let this initial clip play of me getting some stuff and finding somewhere safe to put it, I'm just going to explain how I intend to go about this, at least in the early builds, when stuff is a lot jankier. So the only real rule that I've actually set in place for myself is that I will not allow the use of cheats in this world at all. I'm not going to edit the files in any way, like the world files. I will have to move them around a bit for something in particular that I want to do in a little bit, but other than that, no cheats. I won't be using April Fool's snapshots because that's out of the realm of what I want to do. I'm not going to do anything that's what I consider to be overly tedious or not worth it. The main objective here at the start is just to get things that I cannot get later on, since they become unavailable, discontinued, things that have been patched out of the game, stuff like that. Oh yes, I should mention that duplication exploits are on the table, at least early on, to speed things up, because the point is not necessarily to be playing old versions of the game to experience them necessarily, more so to get the things that they have that I can then bring into the future. So if I need to duplicate things like food, blocks for building structures that I will need later on, I will be doing so just to speed up the process a bit, because that's not necessarily the point of being in this version of the game. I will be building farms where necessary in the future, so long as they can at least last for a bit, because I wouldn't want to build up a big structure only for it to serve purpose for maybe 1 or 2 versions before it becomes obsolete. If I can do it faster, then I think that just saves me some time, but there will be some things that I will need to build farms for regardless, because I can't duplicate things like experience early on, and it's mostly to give me a head start regardless, just because I don't want to be floundering around for ages. I want to get the cool stuff, I want to see the cool stuff, and I want to bring it up, because there's a lot of things that I've been able to find and scour over, like the discontinued wiki and various videos that I've seen that I thought were cool, that I want to put together into a world to have to show off. So that's the plan. I've got a list of things that I've put together that I will be ticking off, that you will be able to see as I go through them, as I advance through the versions, as I put things together, establish a base, all that kind of stuff. And the reason why I'm walking so far away from the spawn area is just to be on the safe side, I suppose. There's a lot of weird chunk shenanigans and stuff that can happen, and I want to make sure that the stuff that I've got can be safe, especially given something that I'm going to do a bit later on in this video, which involves chunks being loaded in ways that they ought not be. So I just want to make sure that I set up a little established base somewhere else where I can have somewhere safe to put these things. So I take a note of my coordinates, I gather myself some wood, and by the time I get back there it is dark, and in the early versions the beta is very dark, you can hardly see anything. So I build this little house, and I kind of retreat for the night, just so that I don't get murdered. And then I put away the stuff that I've got into a chest, and I pretty much just wait it out until it starts to get light, so that I can finish building it up. When the sun comes up, I make an entrance. I try to put my door down in place. It doesn't really work how I want it to. The block update from the pressure plate doesn't interact well with a half door, it just kind of breaks off, so I just have to settle for a manual door. Then I get back to work building the rest of the house, decorating it a little bit with stairs. You can't use upside down stairs in this version of the game, which makes me sad. I always like to use them to add depth, but I can at least use them to make a half decent roof, maybe. And that's it. There's my house, the house that I've made that I'm very proud of, that used exclusively wood and nothing else. No windows, not even a full door or anything. But I think it's great, and it'll get the job done, and it'll keep my stuff safe. And then I go and I dig for some coal to make some torches, because I don't want creepers spawning inside of my house and blowing up the things that I can never get back. But I don't have any coal to find my coal to make torches, so I use fire as a light source to dig out my coal, so that I can then use that coal to make torches, and then I don't have to use fire like a caveman. And on the way out, I get jumped by a spider and almost die. I then put my torches up in my house, and I go and I look for some food to eat to try and recover my health. I think it's messed up how meat drops are chance-based in this version, though with that I can say that I am done with beta 1.6. I can check that off my list. That is the first thing done. And I now move up to beta 1.8, where there is one thing that I'm looking for, and unfortunately I forgot to record it. What I wanted from this version was the 64 stack of ender pearls, since in beta 1.8 pre-release you are able to stack ender pearls up to 64. So I want to go and find an ender pearl, and then just dupe it a whole bunch, and then get a chest full of those. So that is what I did, but unfortunately I cannot show it off, at least getting them. Though I was able to show off the old chainmail armor crafting recipe that you can use with fire, which is an interesting choice for a crafting recipe. I can see why that would later be removed, because it does not really make sense. I also had a strange visual glitch where my model was warped in a way to where it seemed like my skin was attempting to be applied to an Enderman's model. I don't really know what is up with that. I then go to smelt up some of my iron to make some armor, and the game crashes. So I make up my armor, and then the game crashes again. Very stable build of the game I'm seeing. This is very good. So at this point, I'm done with beta 1.8. I got the pearls that I needed, even if I didn't show you them, which means that I can tick that off my list. And now we're on to 1.9 pre-3, in which I have many things that I need to do. The first of which involves putting stuff in the nether, which means that I'm going to set up a little nether hub. So in these versions you can not only put water in the nether with the water blocks from the debug chests, you can also put end portal blocks in the nether via the debug respawn feature that you get in pre-release 3 of beta 1.9, because when you respawn you get a bunch of stuff that they left in. So I make myself a tiny little structure to put my portal block on, where it will live forever, and then I go into the nether and I jump into lava. And then upon respawning, I have some goodies in my inventory, and two things that look unfamiliar because they are unfinished. Those are the end portal frame on the left, that's the blue thing, and then the grey square is the end portal block on the right, and if you hover over it at any point in this version, the game will crash instantly. Just like that. So I decide on making the floor, at least, of my nether hub out of brick, since there really aren't very many options this early on in the game's development. I have, like, stone, cobblestone, mossy stone, sandstone, and brick, or, like, gravel. There's really not many choices this early on. So I dig up to the top of the nether where it's safe, and I'm gonna move my portal up there. Portal linking surprisingly still works well in the old versions. I didn't know if they would link correctly or if it would put the portal somewhere up in the sky. I think that was some jank that was in the game at some point. I light it, I go through, everything works, it links up, great, wonderful. I set up a 4-way portal just because I think it'll look better, it'll be symmetrical, it'll work better with the circular room, and then I start digging out the space. The design is pretty simple. It's just a glowstone ring, which is going to have the end portal inside of it, and then a cross pattern of bricks to lead out to the pathways, and then there's going to be 4 water quadrants. So here it is, semi-completed, but I decided that I would add some stone slab pillars along the sides, just so that it wasn't all flat netherrack all the way around. And now it's mostly done. I just need to replace the netherrack between those glowstone with end portal, which I now have. They may not look like end portal because it's just a grey square, but when you place them down, they are in fact same as you would know them in the modern game. Right here, I make a blunder. I can't mine the end portal block after I place it down. I would have to use like a bedrock breaking technique or something like that, but it's easier just for me to load a backup, which luckily I do have. And since I pay more attention to placing them this time, I don't make the same mistake twice, and it goes smoothly. This is the nether hub as it stands currently. I've done everything I wanted to with it for the moment, so it's time to move on to what's next, which is to change the world over to a locally hosted server and update it to pre-release 4, which actually adds the end dimension. The reason for this is that there is a world generation bug only present in the server-side release of pre-release 3 of 1.9, which I will be exploiting here to make some very interesting world generation. And the first step of that is to go into the end dimension in pre-release 4, where it actually exists. And after that, you need to downgrade the server back to pre-release 3, where the end dimension no longer exists, and then load the same player back in. And what this will do is this will confuse the game, because the player will still have the dimension tag for the end dimension, but they will be in the overworld. And the consequence of that is that you get sky dimension generation for any new chunks that the player generates while in this state, in this version. And so my plan is to go out into these newly generated sky chunks and explore a bunch, load a bunch of chunks that have no bedrock floor, that are suspended in the air, just like a huge, nearly empty space that I can pretty much do whatever I want with as I upgrade it into the future, and this is where I'm going to set my central base up. Now, there are a couple of interesting things to observe while the game is in this state, because it's not working as it should. Obviously, the chunks are generating as if it were a different dimension, but also the time of day does not change, does not advance. I explored these chunks for about 30 minutes in total, and the sun did not move from the center of the sky at any point. Also, the clouds are very low in the world currently. It's not quite at the void, they're slightly above, like the bottom of the world, but I don't know why it is that they're down there. Also, hostile mobs don't seem to spawn, like, at all, even in dark areas where there are no light, where monsters should totally be able to spawn. They just don't. No passive mobs either. There's almost no life. Aside from the occasional chicken that spawns for some reason, I don't know why, but I had decided that I was going to go 2,000 blocks out in one direction, and that would be plenty of mass of chunks for me to be able to inhabit and use for whatever I need in the future. I did encounter a spider spawner, though it's weird. The spiders can still spawn from the spawner. It's almost like the rules of the mushroom biomes that you have in the modern game. So I cleared it out, I got the loot, and I just kinda kept going a bit further. And when I got to 2,000 blocks out, I decided that that was good enough for me. I'd leave it there, and instead of making the trek all the way back, I would just leap into the abyss. So the next thing on the docket was to make an XP farm of some description, because before I can progress to any of the release versions, I need to get some levels to get some early enchantments before it's fully implemented. And so I bridge out a bunch over the abyss, over the void, to make sure that nothing can spawn, to try and maximize my raids. Oh, I should mention that by this point, the world is back to a single-player world. This is no longer a locally hosted server. It's back to being single-player pre-release 3. And I have opted to try and set this up as low in the world as possible. I don't know if that's how mob farms worked in the old version, if the world height had any influence on how mobs spawned, but I thought I would go for it anyway, even as just a little bit of future-proofing. The farm design I'm using comes from Etho, uploaded about 13 years ago, I think, back when this would have been relevant to the average Minecraft player. It's a fairly basic design, doesn't involve any pistons or anything. You just have the mobs walking off into a flowing water stream, and then that pushes them down, and then they die, at least in the original design. But I have perhaps jankily modified the way that I'm going to be using it to include a little water catcher system at the bottom so that they don't die, and instead I can kill them so that I can get the experience from them, and then use that experience to enchant my tools and equipment with the enchanted thing before enchantment was fully implemented, which will become something else when I upgrade to a newer version. Despite minor hiccups in the construction process, things went relatively smoothly, and before too long I was able to start farming some experience. I set up my enchanting table, which the game had so graciously given me a very large surplus of, and then immediately began to enchant my tools. Enchantment does not serve any functional purpose in this particular release of the game. This was when they were first added, it was still in development, and it is purely cosmetic at this stage of the game, though upon upgrading to a newer version, all of these enchantment tags will become feather falling 1, allowing me to have feather falling on any tool or equipment I would like. And now, as you can see, all of these tools and equipment that I enchanted do have feather falling 1. There is something else that I wanted to do in pre-release 4, and that was Silk Touch Infested Stone from a Stronghold. However, unfortunately, after doing some testing, loading the seed in a creative world, checking where the strongholds were, as a consequence of the way that my world has generated, there are no strongholds, which means that I cannot get Infested Stone, since that is the only place where it generates in this version of the game. You can, however, see the ender pearls that I stacked up that I managed to get during pre-release of beta 1.8 when they stacked up to 64 as I went back to the base to make the Eyes of Ender to go in hunt of the strongholds. The eyes did lead me to a location, but when I got to the location there was no structure there, because they go to the place where they think that the stronghold is, but because of some thing that happened with my world, there is just no structure there. And so to finish up, I'm just going to get incompatible enchantments on a diamond pickaxe, because why not? And that'll be where this video ends, because that's pretty much everything I wanted to do up to the release of Minecraft, and I think that's a pretty good place to end this off for now. There may be more of this in the future. There's still a lot of items left on my list to check off, and a lot of interesting stuff to go through, so you might see me again soon. But for now, I'm finished. See ya.